right, well, hello everyone. My name is Susan Peters, and this is Emily Mills, and we are so glad to be with you guys, and we're actually really glad to be together too. We don't get to do this very much. I'm the founder and the CEO of Unbound Now, which is an anti-human trafficking organization, and Emily will tell more about her story and her organization and the impact in a moment with Lovely Village and her husband Brett, famous Brett in the back. So awesome. Well, I'll begin with just telling you a little bit about just kind of my story and how we started Unbound Now, a little bit about our impact. I have a video to show you that kind of shows the life and the work that we do. And we gave you a handout. We said we would talk a little bit about myths and reality and some of the trauma-informed solutions, which Emily really will touch on when she comes up. And then we'll do Q&A at the end. So, sound good? Mm-hmm. All right. And so this goes from 1 to 2:15. So y'all keep us on track. If we're
and get your questions ready.
Yeah.
I want you to make sure it's interactive when it gets to that point.
Yeah. So for my story, I was a pastor on staff at a church. And part of my job was traveling internationally to go visit the missionaries and just encourage them and things like that. And prior to 2012, which is 2012, almost 14 years ago is when we started Unbound Now. And every country I went to came face to face with human trafficking. So I went to Uganda and met just young men who were once little boys playing in their villages when the LRA, or the Lord's Resistance Army, came through, kidnapped them, and forced them to be child soldiers, which is a form of human trafficking. And I just remember seeing them and being kind of intimidated because of the atrocities that they had committed, but then realizing they were forced into this situation, and they were just trying to heal. But my heart was just saying, Lord, how are they going to heal if someone doesn't walk alongside of them through that recovery process? And then I went to Thailand, went to Cambodia, went to Dominican Republic. Just, it really didn't matter. India just came face to face with brothels and karaoke bars that had young children being sold, and my heart was just breaking. And so for many years, I just kept journaling and praying, saying, what could be done? And for me, my heart was, where are the people of God? Where are the churches? What are we doing about this? And so finally in 2012, I just thought, if I don't try to do something, then I'm disobeying God. I'm going to try to do something in this work. And so I went to the elders of our church and I said, someone can do all the church jobs I do. I have to try to do this. And I don't have a social work background. I do have a master's in leadership. I'm pretty good at pulling smarter people than me together to say, how can we tackle this? And we just kind of kept falling forward. And like I said, I thought we would do international work, but when I met my first 14-year-old American kid, and she told me how her and these young girls were kept in an apartment complex and they were sold day and night, weren't in school for a year, and law enforcement had recovered them. I'll never forget when she was telling me her story, she just looked straight at me and she said, we didn't think anyone cared this was happening to us. And everything in my heart went to say, we care, we just didn't know. And so for me at that time, I was like, we've got to pivot. We've got to look at home. We've got to find out what's happening in our own American cities with our own children being sold for sex in our neighborhoods. So we started researching, and I was just blown away. My husband and I actually lived here in Waco for 40 years, raised our 4 adult daughters here, and I was here until 2 years ago where we moved to Fort Worth. But we first started researching just in Waco, just looking on Backpage and just the normal where you would order a used car or find a used refrigerator, you could order young people for sex. And so we started saying, how can we reach them? How can we find them? How can we identify them? And that's how we started Unbound Now. And we knew that we can't do this alone, that it needs, no one agency can do this. We partnered with JSL, who have, Lovely Village Now, you'll tell them that they had been doing it long before us and learned so much from them, and then other agencies in the community like the Child Advocacy Center and Victim Services at law enforcement and just different ones, and just saying, how can we come together and really protect the young people that are in our communities? And not just children, although that's our main focus, but so many 18 to whatever age started in as they were children, and so they needed the resources to be helped as well. And so we started with doing a lot of prevention because we wanted to get in schools. We wanted to get in the juvenile detention center. We wanted to get in group homes where we could really educate young people on social media safety and about the tactics of a trafficker and just what their own vulnerabilities are that can make them susceptible to befriending someone who they think is another 16-year-old boy who turns out to be a 40-year-old trafficker. How do we educate them on that? And now we're just over 200,000 students that we've been able to educate over these years, which is really, really amazing and so important. And then, of course, when you do that, you get outcries. That someone who never had the language for what happened to them, they just thought, I'm in a bad family situation, I'm not lucky, I made a bad choice. You know, we always usually tend to think it's my fault if I'm in this situation. And so, and of course, complex trauma, when you've been abused like that, makes it super confusing to be able to say, hey, this is what's happening to me. But when we educate, all of a sudden those pieces come together. And so many times after we go to the juvenile detention center, we do several lessons, all of a sudden I think that's what's happening to me, or I think that's happening to my friend, and the pieces come together. And that's when we can get them connected to what we call as an advocate. It's a full-time staff person who meets with that survivor and walks alongside them. And you'll hear Emily Mills, the same thing. It's really walking alongside people and learning as much as we can so that we're trauma informed. We don't want to re-traumatize someone by not knowing. We learn all the time. I mean, I can rewind 12 years ago and go, wow, we made some mistakes, you know. But there's a lot of research out now, and there's a lot of really great social work modalities that help us connect with people in a really holistic way. And then we marry that with a lot of prayer, and the impact in survivors' lives as we walk with them has really been pretty phenomenal to see them recover and get their life back. One of our first cases we had here in Waco was help yourself anywhere you want to sit. Oh, okay. Was a young girl who was in the juvenile detention center, and she was a routine runaway, which, you know, runaway youth are at high risk of being trafficked. And a lot of times, unfortunately, law enforcement or maybe the school or other service providers, you know, we just see the behavior and we make judgments about that behavior. But what we found through experience is if we can get in there with them and say what's going on, and they can feel safe enough, then a lot of times they are running away from a very abusive situation. And we need to understand those dynamics, because so many of our survivors will say, I just got picked up and put back as my trafficker, or back in a very exploitive way. And so they just are repeat runaways, and those are real vulnerabilities for people that we want to understand what's going on in their life that makes them do that kind of behavior. And so that's super important, and that's why we partner together, so that when a counselor at school sees someone that's missing a lot of school, you know, we want to help change the mentality of they're not just getting mixed up in the wrong crowd, they're not just dabbling in drugs, but is there a player behind that is luring them away? And we try to educate those frontline people so that they can identify that, and we can get involved in their lives. And so I know many of you are in the trenches in different spaces, and it is so wonderful. And we like to say, you know, awareness saves lives, prevention saves lives. So wherever you are in your area of service, when you're serving the community and the vulnerable, we say that's anti-trafficking work, because there are so many traffickers and perpetrators that are out there trying to identify and pull away our vulnerable people. And when we can have the eyes and ears to understand what those vulnerabilities are, when unfortunately maybe they have parents that are incarcerated, or there's addiction in the home, there's intense poverty. We had a case recently where the child kept leaving and running away and was being trafficked, and when our advocate really got involved in her life, just they were in such abject poverty that she was trying to make enough money to keep the electricity on to bring food back to her family. And so we were able to give more resources to the family, which stabilized this kid to be in school. That'll change the trajectory of your life as it goes. So it's a really holistic approach. So I hope that whatever lens you have on and how you engage with people, that you see yourself as, no matter what you're doing, engaging with vulnerable people, you're protecting vulnerable people. And I have a friend who is a judge in Colorado, and he was trafficked as a child by his own father. His father was a pedophile, and he trafficked him and traded him for other children. And he blocked it out when he became a teenager and was no longer valuable to them because he got too old. He blocked it out until he was in college, and then all the memories came back.
Wow.
And now he speaks on, he went on to law school and became a judge, an amazing man, and he serves on national councils and things, such a brilliant man. But he said, I am convinced if there was one safe person, a teacher, a counselor, a friend's parent, a neighbor, that just would have said, you seem really sad. If you ever need to talk about something, come talk to me. He goes, I'm convinced I would have told them what was happening. Isn't that amazing? And he went to the doctor with wounds, and the doctor never kept probing, going, why are we having these issues? And that happens sometimes. A young person has STDs, you know, and they just say, I don't know what's going on with that kid. She's got 3 STDs or whatever. It's just saying, why is that kid in this situation? So we've got to ask bigger questions and dig a little bit deeper. But that's what we feel like really saves lives, is when we get involved like that. And the amazing thing is when we walk with survivors like this, we see them get their life back. I mean, think of your own life, someone significant that spoke life over you. I mean, some of you I remember a 6th grade teacher. I came from a highly dysfunctional family, addicted dad, bipolar mom, lots of dysfunction. And this 6th grade music teacher pulled me out of the classroom, and he said, you're a leader. You're going to junior high. There's going to be lots of drugs and alcohol, but you can stand up against it. I remember his name, Mr. Emery. I've never seen him since. I never went the way of drugs and alcohol and all that my family went. My twin brother's been an alcoholic since he was 14. He's still on the streets.
Jesus.
Profound, you know. So I just want to say, we really matter in people's lives. And speaking life over someone, whether it's a moment or it's consistency, which is what we try to develop our organization, is we do that emergency response. We partner with law enforcement because most, you know, of course, traffickers tell their victims, you know, you don't tell them your name, you work by yourself, you don't work for anyone else, you know, they're threatened, they have a quota to meet, there's a lot of fear associated with that, and so they're not going to typically tell the police anything. And so we can go with them and bridge that gap and say, we're an organization, we're not law enforcement, we're not probation, we're not child protective services, we're here just for you, and try to offer them services. We can go to the hospital with them to do a sexual assault exam, because when you're in trauma, trying to figure out social services, medical, legal, what's going on, make a decision for myself, you know, where do you live? I don't know. You know, all those things, it's really confusing, but if they can have that safe adult helping translate that as they want. If they don't want and they're over 18, we can just make ourselves available. But so many times we can give them our card, or law enforcement can give them a card. I remember one time a detective gave the card. He called me like at 2 a.m. He goes, I don't think they're going to call. She cussed us out, everything else. We had to put her in jail because she had X, Y, and Z on her. And she called us the next day. And so we were able to go get her and then continue to walk with her towards freedom. And so being available, being knowledgeable of what to look for, asking deeper questions really saves lives. And we're so honored to do that in our organization. And there are many others where we can do that emergency response, but then we offer ongoing case management to follow them up so that in those ups and downs, they have a safe person to call. And we can connect them with getting their license. You know, what's an educational plan that's going to work for them? You know, going back to mainline school is not usually in their best interest. So what's a creative resource for education to help them? And just so many things that we can do that. I remember we had one survivor, and our advocate had been walking with her through a rehab. Wasn't successful for the first one, went through the second one, was successful with it, got her in safe housing, went to go take her to get her ID, and then they went through like a Chick-fil-A drive-through, and she was just staring at her ID, and my advocate said, so what are you doing? And she said, this is the first time I feel human. It's like, I have my identity, I have my name, I have my choices. You know, it's just amazing. And I think for us as the people of God, you know, the Lord says, you know, he sees the end from the beginning, right? And it says, the just shall live by faith. We want to see people in their trauma as God has made them in his image, that he has a destiny for them, and that when they're acting out or they're being reactive or being triggered, like if, you know, we take someone to the hospital maybe and they get triggered and they're, you know, yelling and all this, they have to call security. We want our team to understand that's trauma speaking, This is not who they are and who they'll always be. So I need to see them 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, and just treat them with dignity and help get them safe and their resources so they can do that. We had another one recently, was a 14-year-old, and she had to be transferred like an 8-hour drive to a lockdown facility. So unfortunately, Child Protective Services was transporting her and she was in handcuffs, and they called our advocate, thank goodness, and said, will you transport with us because you serve her? And so of course we wanted to, because we would much rather than not in handcuffs and treated that way, but sometimes they have to do things legally. And so our advocate was with her, and she had a meltdown on the way. She acted out on the way. And it's very traumatic to go through all that. And so our advocate, because there's different modalities, and she'll talk about some of those things that you can do to de-escalate someone and try to get them calm and that kind of thing. She connected with her, and finally when they arrived, she grabbed her hands and she goes, I'm not going in unless you go with me. And she's like, of course, I'm going to go in with you. This is the next safe place for you. It's just one more step. And she said, well, I'm not going in without my eyelashes, and I'm in handcuffs, so you got to have my eyelashes on. And so the advocate put her eyelashes on, and she went in. And I think it's just, meeting people where they are in their journey of healing. And I know if you're sitting here and you're at this conference, it's not usually linear, right? It's up and down. But if we can walk with people from that emergency and then through that ongoing support, we see so many people recover their lives, and it's so rewarding. So I'm just going to take a moment and show y'all this video, and this is a little bit about what we do. Let's see here.
I can turn the lights down too, it might help, since that screen's
Okay,
small.
let's see what happened here. Okay. Trying to do the volume here.
Yes, it's cool.
It's not, there it is, okay, there, good. Had to point it.
Turn the volume on your computer up too.
In our nation, 1,091,000 people are victims of human trafficking. These are people from our schools, our neighborhoods, our cities. Unbound Now tenaciously pursues freedom for every person affected by human trafficking. 24/7, 365, we proactively identify victims and respond to emergency crisis calls. Across our locations in Texas and Louisiana, our expertly trained staff care for survivors through the healing journey. and are doing so with a steadily expanding geographic reach. Since 2012, we worked hand in hand with police, sheriff's offices, child welfare agencies, educators, legislators, and prosecutors to ensure no victim falls through the cracks. When law enforcement identifies a victim of human trafficking, Unbound Now is often their first phone call. A trafficking survivor, when they're found, faces a critical first 24 hours. Our staff initiates immediate safety planning, ensuring that this child or adult is not re-trafficked or further endangered. As the situation stabilizes, our advocate walks alongside the survivor to get their life back. Together they work on resuming their education, attending counseling and trauma therapy, receiving proper medical care, and sometimes even testifying in court against a trafficker. Thousands of people are waiting for their moment of freedom. Made in the image of God, each one merits our most excellent advocacy. Together, we can extend protection, freedom, and hope to those who need it most. Take a moment with me to hear what this means in the words of a survivor we've served.
My life was pitch black. I felt enslaved. I felt deserted, lost, exploited, wondering if I'd ever be free from all the pain I endured. My life felt like a nightmare, like a bad illusion. The only light I had was Unbound Now. I had no money. I was alone, several states away from home. My mom had no idea where I was until Unbound Now found me. They helped me to get home by arranging a flight that very next day. They housed me while I was waiting to go home. They even gave me a flip phone so I could call my mom. I didn't know there was something out there that could change my life. I thought I was stuck, trapped in this life forever. I felt like God was using Unbound Now to guide me on my path to recovery. Because of Unbound Now, I am home with my family. I'm graduating high school, which was a personal goal of mine. I'm also beginning college and getting therapy for my PTSD. They've sent me books to keep my mind occupied. They are also arranging a tattoo removal with my trafficker's name, which will help me remember I am free. I don't belong to anyone anymore. It's hard to believe what I've been through, but I will rise up. And I remember I am not alone. The world keeps spinning and people move on, but Unbound Now continues to check up on me and my new path of freedom. I am so thankful for Unbound Now. God bless.
So it's hard stories to hear, but just with support, so many people can just recover and get the healing and recover their life, and so it is so worth it. And I want to draw your attention before Emily comes to your papers, because we talked about, if y'all read what we talked about, really the myth versus reality. We think that's so important because when people believe myths about trafficking, it actually really hinders victims from being identified. So in the early days, I'm embarrassed to say, our posters and our brochures had like the duct tape across the face and, hands, wrists tied, because that's kind of what we thought. Trafficking victims were held captive, but really they're not held captive by ropes and duct tape. It's in their mind, it's through coercion, it's through really forceful relationships. And so it's important that we understand that, because we were doing a disservice by those images, because someone who had been trafficked by their dad, by an uncle, their neighbor down the street, but they were able to go to school and they were able to come home and occasionally go on an event, they were like, well, I'm not trafficked because I'm not held in the basement, but yet they were. And so it's important that we identify the realities of that. And so if you look at that common myths and reality, trafficking always involves kidnapping. We've only had a couple. In 6,000 victims that we've served in all these years, we've only had a couple of kidnapping cases. It really is through relationships and someone reaching out through social media and pulling them in and that kind of thing. It's a fallacy that it happens only overseas, as we already discussed. Our victims, almost all of them, 95% are American young people, boys and girls. Victims try to escape or ask for help. Like we said, many victims, they don't identify as victims. It's a slow coercion and a manipulation of a lot of chaos, and it's hard to make sense of what happened to them. And so they're not going to present at the counselor or a teacher or the hospital usually as a victim. They really don't understand that for a while. Only women and girls are victims. Now boys and young men are victims as well. Trafficking means moving someone across the border. No, it's not about transportation, it's about exploitation, so that trafficking happens in our own community and doesn't even have to be transported. Buyers are strangers. Many of the community members, professionals, and peers are buyers, and we've seen that definitely in the arrest. And so you can see on the back there some other helpful hints, but I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and you'll get to hear from her.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks.
Good job. I know it can feel incredibly overwhelming when you start listening to the realities of what Susan and her team deal with on a daily basis. Hold on. There we go. My journey into this issue is a little bit different, although there's some common threads for sure that I have with Susan. We both love the Lord. We both are believers. My husband and I had been in church ministry and leading worship for years and years. And it was actually because of our worship ministry that we were invited to a conference in 2004. And I had just had my firstborn daughter, Hattie, who's now 22, which is wild. But we went to sing. We thought it was a women's conference. And so we thought, oh, we know how this is going to go. And one by one, women began to take the stage and tell their stories of sexual exploitation. Some of them had been trafficked. Some of them were working on the streets. Some of them were in strip clubs. And the common thread in each of their stories was childhood sexual abuse. And here I am holding my then 1-year-old daughter. I'm with the band, standing at the back of the room, having just sung songs like, I'll bring you more than a song, and I'm going to worship you. And here were these women. I had served with Mission Waco at the homeless breakfast every Friday morning. And then I'd get in a bus and I'd go and sing with lights and stages. And I began to think, where's the church? What are we doing about women who are in our very own community? That common thread of childhood sexual abuse was part of my story. And I began to wonder, why did she end up there? And how did I end up here? Much like Susan and the 6th grade teacher who says, I think you've got leadership potential. I wasn't just raised by my family. We are raised in a context. We are all raised in a context. It is not just your family of origin that raises you. It is your city. It is your church. It is your school teachers. It is your extracurricular sports coaches. And I had women invest in my life. I had a Sunday school teacher because I thought I was maybe going to go to junior college. But she got me in the car and she said, I'm going to drive you to Baylor University. I think you could fit here. And I received a call to ministry. I was on a ministry scholarship. And so one person in a child's life can absolutely change the trajectory of what we know are outcomes of childhood sexual abuse. Childhood sexual abuse is so traumatic because it grooms children to be further exploited and then become trafficked. So in the same way that Susan shared, many of the survivors that they share don't even know they're being trafficked. We see this all the time. So back to that conference, I decided after hearing these women, it's 2 weeks till Easter, let's get gift bags together and go into strip clubs. Because there are 3 strip clubs in Waco. Let's do outreaches to the 3 strip clubs in Waco. There are now no strip clubs in Waco, but back then there were 3. And so we started just by simply doing outreach, giving practical gifts and love with no strings attached. But what we started with is not where we've ended up and where we've grown, because we've been listening to survivors every single step of the way as we've built our programs. But I met women there that were just like me. We have so many biases about women who are in this industry or women who have survived incredible odds. But I met mothers. We shared pictures of our children. I met women whose grandpas were Baptist preachers. And here they were in the strip club working. And so what I want to put before you today is, when we think about trafficking or sexual exploitation, what is the context of a choice? We start to judge people by their choices, by the way they're acting, and we say that's their choice to act like that. Trauma responses are not always moral responses. In fact, if somebody comes to you and breaks in this room and does something horrible, the way that you respond in that moment, you are not in control of. Your fight, flight, or freeze response is ingrained. It is encoded. And you have to learn then how to respond differently. And you can retrain your brain through healthy relationships and healthy responses. But your trauma responses aren't always moral choices. And so I look at the context of the choice. I say, what choices did you have? How long have you been working here? What got you into dancing? And slowly we began to hold stories. We began kind of collecting this overarching understanding that each one of them had a different entrance. Most of them were sexually abused as a child, and some of them did not even know that they were currently being trafficked. We had one survivor in the early days who, she grew up in the Midwest, and she'd met somebody online, and he had wooed her enough to get her to Waco, bought her a plane ticket, brought her down here, and as soon as she was down here, he drove her the first day or second day to the strip club and said, if you want to be with me, this is where you're going to have to work to make money to pay rent. Okay, that's not your boyfriend. And if you are not controlling your own money, then you are being trafficked. Research has shown that 50% of women in prostitution don't even control their own income. That means 50% of women in prostitution are being trafficked. So early intervention is possible, but if we never had, if we solely focus on children, then we've got multitudes of adults that don't even know their own trauma story. They don't even know the details. So we've got to do both. And that's why we can't do it all. So that's why Unbound does what they do. And we work with women who've experienced, we are a healing community for survivors of sexual exploitation, trauma, and trafficking. And through working with survivors and walking alongside them, they begin to put the pieces. Education is power. And so as we begin to train and to teach and to talk and to do life with and to advocate, we begin to start seeing where their individual story of sexual trauma, what those nuances are in differentiation. So we do this through safe housing, stable community, living wages, and sustainable success. So I'm going to kind of go backwards because we haven't yet been able to move our first survivors into our safe housing here in Waco. We started as an outreach organization that strictly reached women in clubs. And that wasn't enough. And I'm not disparaging our early starts and our early beginnings, but as Susan and I have talked about our organizations, you look back and you go, man, I wish we could have done things a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficiently, a little bit different. And one of those things is we didn't know what we were looking at. In 2004, there wasn't a lot of conversation around sexual trauma, sex trafficking. I mean, you just saw women who had the scarlet letter on them, and you thought, oh, they're in strip clubs because they want to be. We didn't understand the reality. We were believing myths that culture had told us and glamorized. And so while we started as an outreach organization, we slowly began to hear the needs of survivors. And they said things like, we surveyed 30 women who we had contact with, and some of them had just left the industry and won a different life. Some of them were still in it. And we said, what if you could have any kind of program that, you know, was meeting your needs? What would you want us to build for you? What would you want us to go raise money for and go create? And unequivocally, their answers had to do with money, had to do with jobs. And so some of them wanted to get jobs. Some of them wanted a safe place to work. Some of them wanted to be able to keep a job. Some of them had started off strong, but then maybe a boss came in and acted aggressive, and they had a trauma response. And we had one woman who punched a hole. Our employer was so gracious, and she worked with us so much, but right down the road. And she said, Emily, the holes in the walls. I mean, I can't criticize one thing that this woman that you've referred me to is doing, because she's going to punch a hole in the wall. And so I began to work with employers. I began to train employers on what trauma response looks like and how to deal with that and de-escalate and ground. Childcare became an issue with living wages. And then some women also wanted to start their own businesses. Some already had transferable skills. Some of them had been really entrepreneurial most of their lives. They knew customer service really well. Think about this. They knew customer service, they knew marketing, and they could put those skills to use for dignified wages. And so we, to date, have launched 5 businesses, and we've been able to graduate 20 women from our Access program, and then employ survivors on staff with us. So the living wages is really, really important to us, because when you talk about survivors having a voice and having a choice or an opportunity, that does not come without the economic means to choose. So it's most of the women that we work with are battling generational poverty. Many women come from families who, we had one survivor who said, I don't know of a woman in my family that wasn't in prostitution. She said, I've only known this type of work. I didn't know that there was another option for me as a woman. So again, it's that representation. If you don't see a possibility for your life, then it becomes what you do and what you fall into. So we make really incredible products that I'm displaying over here. Everything's ethically sourced, socially responsible. We make these right here in Waco, Texas. And if you go to the Goodwill on New Road, they also carry our products now. So they're doing a partnership with us for the foreseeable future. But the work environment and the wages that women earn is part of what keeps them from vulnerability. Poverty and trafficking are inextricably linked. You know, there was a study that came out, I think the Locus Effect in 2010, when it was looking at global poverty. And it said the number one factor in global poverty is the sexual abuse of women and children. That is the number one factor. That doesn't mean it's the cause, but it means it is this common factor. When we look at any community that's struggling with poverty, we will find childhood sexual abuse and gender violence, the sexual abuse of women. That's why it is so important that not only do you have these economic choices for women to make, and that we're putting agency and choices in their hands to choose what they want for their own lives, but you've got a community. It's important to have a community that is aware and that says we're not tolerating sexual abuse of anyone, because it will decrease the flourishing of our whole community. Follow this just train of thought with me. If a woman who has been sexually abused as a child is then groomed to become further exploited, I want you to think about her as a 12-year-old. I want you to think about everything that as a 12-year-old girl, or boy, but a girl, everything that a 12-year-old girl is already facing. Already. And depending on where she comes from, her choices are already limited, depending on what zip code she was born in, depending on the color of her skin, depending on the community that she lives in. All of those factors even for the best of us, is still going to be a challenge, because growing up as a girl in this culture is a challenge. There's already odds stacked against you. If you compound that with a girl who believes that what she does with her body is more important than what God has meant for her heart and for her brain, and you've got a culture that is rewarding who she is and how she looks continually, eventually, that can become anxiety, depression, lack of motivation, falling asleep in class, becoming promiscuous with boys. You don't know the way that abuse is going to factor into her life. And the more our trauma becomes compounded into adulthood, the graver the consequences of how we respond to it. So, you then are looking at women who are incarcerated. You're looking at addiction, because what soothes? What makes me feel better, right? If I'm running from all these things. One of the best things that we can do is to center survivor voices. Listen to these types of stories. Listen to the nuance in what she has encountered, and believe survivors. Survivor voices, from outreach to outcomes, every single one of these women are women who we knew early on, and you wouldn't know it, but some of them are running programs at community colleges right here. Some of them are running events for a country club right here that you need your wedding done by she's working at the country club now. Some of them are working as our production coordinator. And you never know who you meet in a situation that is going to be able to completely rebuild their lives for better outcomes. But you cannot do that if you're not listening to the needs of survivors. You have to listen to what they want, what they need, and then build your programs around it. So for those of you working in churches or nonprofits, or if you're on the board, I want you to, if you guys are board members, this is really, really crucial as well, or you're volunteering. Begin to ask these questions of your organizations. Avoiding the rescue mentality and language, it's so easy to do. Obviously, in trafficking situations, there's an element of rescue. If someone cannot and doesn't have the ability to reach out, yes. But when you begin to set yourself up as the savior, then it becomes a really codependent relationship, because a survivor will do anything to get their needs met. They will perform any way they have to. And so you have to be very careful as an organizational leader, as a board member, that your organization is about empowerment and not enablement. Adopting empowerment models and systems, the way that this looks for us is at every level a survivor is going to be there, whether it's foundation, whether it's the board, whether it's staff, whether it's volunteers. We want representation at every single level. And so you will not find a program that has been created by us that has not touched the hands and the brains of multiple survivors. We want to know from them, hey, I might have a good idea, and yes, I'm a survivor of sorts, but I wasn't a trafficking survivor. So what does she know more than what do I know, and how do I need to listen to her? And I haven't been a single mom. And so I'm going to now start listening to single motherhood and saying, what do we need to do differently? So adopting that empowerment model from the board level all the way to your volunteers is really important. And then the last thing is implementing restorative justice practices. So 2 of our programs specifically implement restorative justice principles. And restorative justice is about reducing harm outside of incarceration. Jail does not heal people. Prisons don't heal people, right? These are privatized systems that are meant to make money. Now, God can use them, but God can use a donkey, right? So God will use anything. But that's not the goal. It's not like the lowest bar. So for our organization, we want to say, how do we bring the offense of sexual trauma and the healing and the voices, the centered voices of survivors. And how do we do that through a way? So 2 programs specifically. One is one that my husband leads and helped me start this. This is Brett back here. Hi, in the back. And Brett began Stop Demand School. We had a need in the Human Trafficking Coalition that Unbound started, and we heard that there was a need for a re-entry program, or why am I blanking on?
John School.
There was a John School, not where you teach people to become Johns, but this is where you teach people who've been arrested for sex buying. And so we needed a program that was restorative. And so to date, there's been well over hundreds of people who've been arrested for sex buying who have to take our class. It's an 8-hour class. They can take it online or in person. And through that, they listen to survivors. So the class is never done without hearing specifically of who was behind that transaction when they were clicking to buy that girl online, who was behind that motel door when they were about to open it up. And these are for first-time offenders, but the feedback that we get is that your program humanized the people that I thought I was just buying for something that I needed. And it changes when you begin to put a story behind a transaction. There's always a cost. And the second program that we've created is our support circles. So every week we do a survivor support group, and this is for women who are adults and who've experienced any kind of sexual trauma. So from early childhood, maybe they're on the streets working in prostitution right now. Maybe they were a college student and on Baylor University campus and they had someone stalking them. So the sexual trauma is a broad umbrella. But when we look at the impact of it, many of the outcomes are the same. So you can have someone who's experienced trafficking sitting by someone who's 50-year-old living in McGregor in an affluent neighborhood, but they're both struggling with anxiety. They're both struggling maybe with bipolar. They're both struggling with some of these outcomes that we have because of sexual trauma. And it's restorative because what it does is it centers the survivor voices, and it uses what's called a circle process. And in a circle process, you create containment. You have a facilitator that's peer-led, so there's no instructor saying you have to do this, you have to do that. The authority, if you will, is shared. And this is a space where each survivor gets to go around and has space for their stories to be believed. They get to see other women who've been just impacted by sexual trauma, maybe in a different way, with varying outcomes. And so it's really powerful if you know women in Waco who need it. So what we do on the daily, outreach and education, stable community is our case management and next steps. We still do outreaches, even though there aren't clubs in Waco. There are still 3 clubs in Killeen and Fort Cavazos area that we reach out to every single month. And then living wages, our jobs and job training, and then safe housing is our biggest project for women and children. So we just received a $600,000 grant from the city of Waco to refurbish apartments that are on close to our facilities and near a park. And this housing project is going to be a community. It's unlike anything Waco has because we don't have housing for survivors of sexual exploitation who have children. One of the biggest problems in healing for women who are moms is when CPS comes in and removes children from custody. Her motivation to heal is out the window. And so it's really, really something that we've needed for a long time. And honestly, we just didn't have the models and the faith for at the time. But we found Thistle Farms in Nashville, Tennessee, and they are our sister organization who is a shared model program for us, and we're super excited. They do jobs and housing. So we can't wait, and that will be upcoming this year for us to break ground on. That's really quick, but I'm looking at our time, and we probably need to get to question. Yeah, if you guys have questions for Susan and I, or anything that popped into your heads, it's kind of getting warm in here, isn't it? I'm going to put that down just a little bit so we can. Yeah, go ahead.
If I'm understanding correctly, so a lot of what y'all do is for victims afterwards. Are there any organizations that work to stop the demand?
There are.
Yeah.
We work with one in the Fort Worth area called the Net, and they have a men's program where they reach out actually online and try to intercept men seeking out fines. They also go on law enforcement raids that talk to the men one-on-one. So there are some like those that across the country. Of course, what we mentioned.
Stop Demand School. Yeah, and so we actually have a curriculum. It started as just a training program for offenders, but Brett actually speaks at churches and organizations. He was with the Baylor basketball and the athletic team to talk about the cycles of what's driving demand, which we know is a lot of pornography. So he works to talk through what is the issue, specifically with men and churches and things like that. So, like Susan said, education is changing lives. It's saving lives. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you know of any organizations similar to yours that are working with men and boys?
You do. Yeah. You know more.
In the DFW Metroplex, there is a new home there for boys. There's only a couple in the nation. It's a very much unresourced area. And some studies show that there's probably as many male victims as female, but they're not being identified. Males are much less likely to identify. We're finding in the juvenile detention center when we do prevention in girls and in boys, we can get the girls to do an outcry week 1, definitely by 2. It takes about week 4 with the boys, but we are getting the same numbers. It takes them longer to trust and to do that. So it's very, very under-resourced. It's a big need in this whole industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are all of you who in the room is from the Waco area? I'm just curious who are okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I was just curious how we were.
Yes.
I noticed on the internet that there was signs that people, the women could leave, that they were being trafficked, they were in trouble. Some hand signals or
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, and then the
Yeah. Actually, I don't know who came up with that.
I don't either.
But I think it's pretty brilliant, and I hope it catches on even more. I don't know the origination of that.
I don't know.
But, I think it saves lives. I think the more that the community is educated on these things, the safer people can be. And so, yeah, I don't know all about that. I really should look into it more, but I think it's a helpful thing.
I didn't know that. I know that there's something at bars that they were targeting with the angel cocktail or angel drink. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. Yeah, angel shot. So that was a new development of a girl who is either being trafficked or being abused or being stalked can go to the bartender and ask for an angel shot. And if the bartender doesn't know, then the victim would say, Google it. And when she Googles it, it says, I'm in trouble, please get authorities right now. And so, because we know bars and clubs are one of the, places that traffickers hide in.
Yeah.
I need to look at the hand signal, though. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like they'll do it behind their back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope it catches on more. I think
Unfortunately, it won't be long before traffickers.
I know.
And then it will be very
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if people know this, but the beer distributors in Texas are some of the best promoters of anti-trafficking. They are going everywhere they go. They bring their traffic. They're truckers and they're delivery people to
That's great.
know about trafficking, to see identify it, and they have records out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I haven't heard that. That's great. I think more and more companies are trying
Yes.
to be educated and educate their people. And I think people, with sanitation, all kinds of people that are cable workers and can be the eyes and ears. And really that's what we say is awareness saves
It
lives.
is.
You see something and you're just like, that doesn't look right.
Yeah.
You save a life. Yeah.
So if you have a situation where you come across someone or you come into a relationship with someone and you realize that this is what's happening, what is your first thing to do?
Mm-hmm. it depends on the situation. Wouldn't you say, if you're out at an event or a gas station and you see something that looks suspicious, we're always going to say call law enforcement. Don't intervene personally. Don't try to. You can try to talk, but if the trafficker is right there and does not want you to talk to what he believes is his property, then that's a dangerous situation for you as well. So the trafficking hotline or local law enforcement can get things there. But if it's a situation where you've got an ongoing relationship, that's where I think knowledge is power, and continuing to give that survivor knowledge and power so that they can begin to see and hopefully build trust enough with you to make an outcry. And once they do make an outcry, to call an organization like an Unbound that can do intervention and next steps for aftercare. Yeah.
But getting things like, the car, the license plate, any kind of details when you think it doesn't look right, and calling law enforcement and telling them. I mean, it's amazing how many lives have been saved when it's just like, this just didn't feel right, didn't look right. I heard one recently of a little girl sitting on a curb, and the lady was like, that doesn't look right, and called police, and literally this little girl was being advertised, the buyer was on the way.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just, it's just that feeling where you're like, this doesn't feel right, and more law enforcement are trained, and they'd rather respond and check into it. I will say sometimes it's disappointing.
Yeah.
You may know something's going on, and they just ask them, and they're like, no, I'm her uncle, I'm her brother, and they walk off, and it's like, what do you do? But many, many times they can save a life, so it's worth reporting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I play a Christian band, and is this a good thing to put on our table to make known, on the merchandise table?
It's a great idea.
Where can I beg, borrow, get?
I'll give you what I got left over, but yeah, we can get it to
So
you.
I can get some.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
This past Sunday, we were doing church in a bar.
Yeah.
Out in East Texas. And I wish I had something
Yeah.
to lead at the bar.
Right, absolutely.
Unfortunately, it's so prevalent now that most people, if you look at your congregation, if you look at who you're playing to, you can pretty much know someone, either knows someone or they've experienced exploitation. And so to know, even just to know there's organizations out there, that they can call for resources, or just is encouraging, to those survivors to know, hey, if we see you, we care, we're doing something about it. So any kind of publicity like that's helpful.
Yeah.
And any other literature might.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you have any aftercare or something, or like, I'm in Hill County.
Mm-hmm.
There's a homeless lady out there that had been trafficked. She's in late 20s, that she's not gonna, how does she get some kind of care? They have really traumatized her. She will not come around crowds.
Yes.
She's not gonna come to a meeting or anything like that. And she's, like, if she comes up to, like, if she came to my house to stay, she would not stay. She would stay in a tent outside. She will not come around crowds. Is there any help for her?
Yeah. I don't know about Hill County specifically of what's going on there. We just had responded to a call in Hill County, and this woman's much older, so it can't be, but unsafe situation. She was able to come in a couple of times, but she eventually just fell off. She didn't want to respond to text, to phone call. It began to be too much intervention for her. The harm was really so severe. But I don't know about Hill County and what they've got in terms of aftercare. Yeah, it really is community by community of who's doing the work. Is your church doing the work? Is there an organization doing the work? How can people respond to those needs, because that's what it takes. It really does take personal relationship, walking hand in hand with each individual.
Is there anybody we can contact to say, can you come, because I'm not trained, can you come and speak with this person?
Yeah, to do an advocate. That's where an advocate, if there's an
Yeah.
outcry for,
Yeah, we have
trafficking.
a crisis line in the communities that we serve. It's open 24/7. So if someone calls, they'll talk through it to see if they can either come out or talk to someone. Yeah.
I'm just thinking who could be in Hill County is Methodist Children's Home, because they just got a grant to serve women and children. And so they could be a good
Yeah,
community
just
to
think of the
do
mental
social
health,
work
any kind
and
of
mental health agencies, yeah.
Seeing what the resources are.
Uh-huh, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. If you've got any other questions, our email and contact is all on the back page, so feel free to, and we'd love to talk to your communities or your churches if you're doing something, about this. Let us know how we can join and how we can talk to you guys to get more people aware. Don't forget to smell and look at our products too.
Thanks for coming.